Hi, my name's Andrea, and I'm one of the instructors here at Rabbit and Rocket in Lancaster, Ohio. And today I'm going to show you an updated version of the mask that we have made previously. The mask itself and the directions are exactly the same. However, we've made a couple modifications to make it a little bit easier. And then at the end of the video, I will share some tips that some of our viewers have shared with us that they have found helpful when making their mask. So the mask that we're gonna make looks like this. And the supplies that you're going to need are a 15 by 10 inch piece of fabric, 2 pieces of elastic, 10 inches long each, a darning needle, writing utensil of some kind. I'm using clips rather than pins to hold my fabric together, some sort of scissors and a ruler of some sort, cutting utensil, and an ironing board. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to, for the mask with a filter pocket, we need to zigzag these edges. So we're gonna go ahead and zigzag the side that is 10 inches long. And I'm using a darker thread so you can see what I'm doing. When I'm making my own masks, I usually find a color that is more neutral or matches the background fabric. Okay, now that I have my short ends zigzagged, I'm going to trim off my extra threads. And now on one side, I'm going to measure 2.5 inches. This is going to be a registration line for us to sew to so that we can make that pocket in the middle for our filter. So I'm measuring 2.5 inches. I'm going to fold my fabric with the right sides together, noticing my marks that I'm going to sew to. And I'm gonna switch the foot on my sewing machine back to my 1/4 inch foot. I prefer to sew with a 1/4 inch foot. It helps my seams stay consistent. Okay, so now I'm gonna take my fabric and I'm sewing a straight stitch from the outside to that line that I drew. And I'm gonna give it a little back stitch right in the center so that that seam stays and doesn't come undone when you throw it in the washing machine. Okay, so now I'm gonna trim off all my extra threads. And I'm gonna go ahead and go to my iron. So now when I iron, I wanna open up my fabric. I'm gonna lay it flat and I'm gonna press my middle seam open. So I'm gonna lay this out open. And when I iron, being careful in the center, I'm gonna fold back those centers. So it gives you like that 1/4 inch fold and press. Okay, now that you have this piece, you're going to measure the corners. This is the part we're gonna sew to help give us our corners in our mask. So coming back over, I'm going to measure 1 3/4 inches on each side. And then I'm going to connect those 2 registration points with a line. I'm gonna sew on the line. So I'm gonna do this for all 4 of my corners. Okay, now I'm gonna go back to my sewing machine and I'm gonna sew on all 4 of those lines. Now that I have all 4 of my corners sewn, I'm going to trim off these extra corner pieces. We don't need them anymore. So I am going to just trim with a 1/4 inch. Oops. Okay, now your mask looks like this. So we are going to go ahead and turn it. So you can turn it through the center pocket or you can turn it through one of the ends, whatever you're more comfortable with. And then we're gonna go back and we're gonna press. So what you wanna make sure is that your corners are nice and sharp. I just use the end of my pencil and just kind of poke the corners out. Make sure they look nice and sharp. And then with the seam up, you're gonna go ahead and press. Okay, now we're gonna go back to the sewing machine and we're going to sew a 1/8 inch seam along the top and along the bottom. This will help keep your mask together so it doesn't roll on itself. You're not gonna sew on the open ends, you're gonna leave those open. So we're gonna start here and we're gonna do 1 continuous seam from top and then along the bottom. And then do the bottom side exactly the same. Okay, now we're gonna go back to our iron. Okay, so now with the seam up or the filter on the inside, you're going to fold up the bottom and you're going to use the points here as a guide for where your fold should be, and it should go over the center line. And give it a press. And then do the same thing for the top. You're going to fold it down. It should overlap in the middle. Again, using your outside points as a fold guide. And now you've made this envelope shape. Okay, this is the tricky part when making this mask. You're going to take the corner and you're going to fold it back so that it makes a perpendicular line to the outside seam. You want the corner to touch the outside. So again, you're gonna take this corner, you're gonna fold it back to make a perpendicular seam, and you're going to clip it. Then you're gonna take the bottom side and do the same exact thing. Take that corner out to the outside, make a perpendicular line, and you're going to clip it. Your pieces should make a straight line here. Now, we're going to make the channel for our elastic. So I'm going to show you two different ways how to do this with the elastic. So you're going to fold up once to that line, and then you're going to fold it over again. You have to move the clip. So now you have it rolled. And the reason we're rolling it twice is so that the raw edges are on the inside of your mask. So now we have one side. So we're gonna go back to the sewing machine and we're gonna sew as close as we can along this seam right here, catching the folds and the two rolls that we've done. You're going through a lot of fabric, so just make sure you go really slow so your sewing machine can handle it. And I'm gonna make sure that I backstitch a little bit as well so that these seams don't come out. And again, it's a lot of fabric, so sometimes you just have to go slow and move your sewing machine. Okay, so now you have one channel done. One of the tips that we got from one of our viewers was to put the elastic in before sewing that seam. So I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So if you're not going to put the elastic in, this next step is the same. You want to start your mask back at that original fold, that envelope fold that we did before we sewed the one side. You're going to take your corner perpendicular, make sure the corner touches the outside, use your clip and hold it. Same thing here, perpendicular fold, back to the outside and clip. So one of our viewers suggested taking the elastic and rolling it in so that you didn't have to pull it through at a later time. So it's a little bit tricky, but you want to make sure that when you fold it in that you do not sew over your elastic. So my elastic's on the inside. I still rolled it twice so that my raw edges are on the inside. And I'm making sure that my elastic is closest to the outside because I'm still gonna do that really close seam right there, catching all of the fabrics. All right, back to the sewing machine. So now you have your elastic in one side. Notice that I didn't sew it, I can move it, and that's what you want to be able to do, is be able to move it a little bit. Okay, for those of us who chose not to put our elastic in when we sew, now we're going to put the elastic in on the other side. I suggest using a darning needle. Some of our friends have used a crochet hook or tweezers or safety pins. Whatever you can find, some of us have ingenious tools to use. You want to pull that elastic through. And then you can do one of two things. You can sew the ends together, or you can tie it. Everyone's face is different shaped, so some of us have to have our friends try it on and then figure out the length of the strings. So let's say you want it about this long. I like to sew mine, so I'm gonna just run a straight stitch over the elastic. That way it's tacked. And then I would trim off the extra ends here, and then I would just roll it in so that that seam is hidden inside of your channel. And then you have a finished mask. So before we close, I'm going to show you a couple tips that we got from some of our other viewers. The first one is some of us are choosing not to put a filter pocket in our mask. So if you want to make a mask without the filter pocket, you are going to just eliminate these first two steps. You're not gonna zigzag, and then you're not gonna draw the 2.5 inches and sew to the center. You're actually just going to sew a straight line all the way across, and then carry on with the rest of the directions. You're gonna fold it up this way and iron and carry on. This mask will not have a filter pocket, so it will be sealed just like this one on the inside, rather than being open here for a filter mask. Okay, so that was the first tip. The second tip that we got was to actually close these open sides. So you can see I've already moved ahead, I've already done my corners. So one of our viewers suggested sewing these two sides closed before flipping it, and I'll show you what that does. So once you close the side, if you were to close the other side as well, once you flip the fabric, you will see that you have a finished edge along the outside here where it's open on this end. Now the benefit to that is when you go to roll, so you would fast forward, you've done this fold, you've done this fold, you can see now that this side is actually sealed. Let me give it a little poke so you can see what I'm talking about. So you can see that the left is not sealed and the right side is sealed. So once you get to this point and you're at the point where you're rolling your edges back, you can choose to roll it just once, and then you don't have so much bulk on the end. Now this is fine if you're doing a filter pocket because you need a way to turn your fabric. If you're choosing not to make a filter pocket, then you can choose to close one side, but you're gonna have to leave one side open so that you can flip your fabric. But if you're doing a filter in the middle, you can actually close off both ends, and then that gives you less bulk to roll on the outsides. So the last tip that we have is some of us don't have access to elastic, or we don't like elastic because it pulls on our ears. So I have found that I just make a coordinating ear tie, or you can do a tie around your whole head using the same fabrics that I used. And all I do is I make a bias strip. So for those of us who have a bias maker, you can make your own. This is a 1 inch and it's a 1/2 inch bias maker. These are really easy to use once you get your fabric in there. Go to your iron, and they're really easy to use. You just iron down the strip and it folds the fabric in for you, and it gives you a bias strip. Once, if you don't have this, you can just take your 1 inch fabric and just fold it into the middle on both sides and just give it an iron. Once I do that, then I roll so both of the raw edges are on the inside. I go to my sewing machine and I'm just going to stitch it closed. So I'm just gonna stitch it closed. And then you have a bias strip. Do the same thing as you did with the elastic, just feed it through the channel, And then you can do one of two things. If you want to make it sized for your ears, I would suggest starting with a piece that's 12 inches long. That way you can size it, since everyone's face is a little bit different. Or if you would prefer to tie around your head, I would make these strips 30 inches long and then feed them the same way through the channel, and then you would tie the top two together around your head and the bottom two around your head. So that's how you can make different ties if you don't have elastic. And then our final question or comment that came up a lot was how to make masks of different sizes. So this is the standard size that we use, is 15 inches by 10 inches. If you want to make a size for your child, you can tell that it's definitely smaller. I made this one 9 inches by 14 inches, so I decreased each side by 1 inch. If you want to make it a little bit bigger than this, then you can go up to 11 inches by 16 inches. The key is to keep that 5 inches between the width and the length. So if you want to make your mask 7 inches wide, you want to make it 12 inches long. So it's the 5 inches in between. And if you want to change your dimensions a little bit based on your own, the key to remember is that the 10 inch, the shorter side, is the side that's going to go across your face this way. The long edge is the ones that go from the nose to your chin. So you can adjust the sizes accordingly to fit the person that you're making your mask. So those are the tips that we got from some of our viewers, and we hope that this helps you make your own mask. The last thing that I want to just share is that we've had people ask about the tools that I use, and I buy all of my tools at like a local large retail craft or fabric store, or you can find the same tools on Amazon. And since people have asked, I'm just going to give you a rundown of what I use, and then we hope that you enjoy making your masks. So the first tools that I have are my Olfa cutting mat and ruler. I have Fiska's rulers. Now this one's well loved because it started out with numbers and registration lines like this one. And you can tell that I really love this one. I use it a lot. I've lost all of my numbers. So this is Fiska's. My bias maker is made by Clover. They come in different sizes. My iron is an Oliso Pro, and it's got the iTouch, so you can leave it horizontal. If you want to not, there's a switch on the back that you can stand it up like a typical iron. And then the last tool I have is called a quilter's cut and press. Obviously you can iron on one side, but you can flip it over and cut on the other side. So again, thank you for watching, and we hope that this helps. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave it in the comment section, and we will answer your questions as quickly as we can. Thanks.